technology to enhance beef calf health. So this webinar has been run through the One Agritech programme, which is supported by Scotland Food and Drink, Aberdeenshire Council, and of course Opportunity North East. We aim to run for about an hour this evening. We're going to hear from our two fantastic speakers. And please, if you've got any questions as we go through, please pop it into the Q&A. Try and, if you like, if we're not touching on something you would like to hear about, please steer us and put some prompts in for us, and we'll make sure that anything is being covered that you would really like to hear about. Just a bit about the One Agritech project. I hope it's summed up in this slide here. Really, it's been running since 2022. Daniel is one of our focus farms, and really the onus of it is installing, testing and monitoring new tech on practical real life working farms, and then showing this the results from it, and trying to speak about these results. So this evening Daniel will speak about some of the tech that he is using and has used over the last couple of years. As well as focus farms, we also have a website, and I would urge you all to go on and have a look at all the resources that are there. There's a QR code that you can just scan just now with your phone, and that will take you straight there. There is a huge amount of information on this website, that all the outputs that have been delivered over the years of the project. One of the newest resources there is the Connecting Your Farm, and that's a brilliant guide, very practical, about just all the different ways that you can connect your farm and broadband. We also have there's an example of an evaluation of new technology there, and when Dan has used something, we sit him down and we make him score how he's got on with it. So they're there as well. So please do have a look at the website and see the resources that are there. So on to tonight. We have got myself as chair, Kirsten Williams, but more importantly, we have got two brilliant speakers, Daniel Robertson from Titaboutie Farm in Tarland, and his vet friend, mentor, Rachael Robertson as well. So they're going to do a bit of a double act tonight, but please, if there's anything that we're not covering, as I say, just pop it into the Q&A and we will make sure that we are covering those. So Dan, I will stop sharing and I will let you take over.
So let me know when you've got the right one. Are you seeing it?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, that's great. Yeah, so thanks very much, Kristen. So yeah, we are the demonstration livestock farm for the Opportunity North East project. And tonight we're talking calf health and technology for calf health. Slides change. So anyway, I just want to caveat what I'm about to say by saying I wasn't a very good stockman when I came home to farm 4 or 5 years ago. So I've been doing a lot of reading, and most of what I've learned in terms of calf health has come from Rachael. So if there's anything you don't agree with, then take it up with her. Sorry, PowerPoint's not responding. So we're going to talk through, obviously, in terms of calf health, it's not just one thing that determines how you get on with calf health. It's a sort of multifaceted approach. So we're going to talk through our system. We're going to talk through, the buildings, the nutrition, monitoring the calves, treating the calves, and prevention in the future. So I'm just going to try and share this again. share this. Um, right, here we go. So I'll start off by talking about our system here at Titaboutie. So we have about 140 sucklers. We do Simmental Cross Angus, and we've recently moved to all autumn calving. So we calve in one block from about the October to 10 to about Christmas. We've been moving from spring to autumn, so it's not quite as tight as we'd like, but we're just about getting there now. We've been finished calving for a few weeks, and we almost finished. We only carried one cow that hadn't calved into the new year, I think. So we're getting there in terms of our targets. But I think it's important that when it comes to, we do this, but I think it's very important that systems are designed around what works for your system. The things that I like to prioritize is calving at a time where I have got time to look after young calves. I think it's really beneficial to have tight calving blocks. I know it can be difficult to manage and it can be expensive if there's bulls not working and stuff. But in terms of calf health, I think the tighter the blocks, the better. And one of the things that I think's going to help us as well is the calving once a year, um, instead of calving in two blocks, just mainly because of the not having older calves and younger calves. So it means that we've either got fattening beasts or young calves. Having all the calves the same age can really help in terms of trying to limit the spread of certain diseases. Um, in terms of technology, the data was critical to making this decisions on the whole system. So when we started this project with Opportunity Northeast, Kirsten came in and we've been collecting EID data and weight, kill sheets and all this for years, and we hadn't really done much with them. But Kirsten came in and we really looked at how our cattle were performing, autumn versus spring, and we found that the autumn was, I think it was about 4 times more profitable than the spring. So combined with pressures of lambing and getting cereals in the ground, we decided that autumn was the system for us. And we don't really have great ground throughout wintering. So even if you've got a lot of data that you don't think is useful, with the right person, I think it can actually help to make really good decisions on your farm. But the first thing we looked at, so just to give you a quick overview, with the autumn calving, but a lot of young calves inside, they're inside for quite a while. So there's big pressure, especially because we were trying to tighten the block. We ended up with, bulling was almost coming into the end of calving, and it was a very high pressure system in terms of disease pressure on young calves. So the biggest things we face are we have problems with pneumonia. We can have problems with scour, be it rotavirus or cryptosporidium. We sometimes get E. coli in very young calves. So that's kind of the main things that we have to fight. So one of the first things we looked at was what we could do to the buildings to help to mitigate. Something we've always done with the autumn calves is to have creep feeds. We find that if the calves have got their own space, clean beds and stuff, that really helps them to feel better, which contributes. But in terms of technology, we had these humidity and temperature probes. So this is part of the LoRaWAN network that they installed. So basically you can put them into any shed and they'll speak to the masts. You don't have to put in any other infrastructure. And it'll tell you the temperature and the humidity inside the shed. Now, what I'm actually going to say about this is that I don't think that's very useful at all. These are very useful if you have active ventilation, something like open and shut or something that can turn on fans. But 99% of the time, those will come with their own temperature and humidity sensors. But what we found was that you look at the data and it tells you it's humid or it's hot or whatever, but there's not really a whole lot you can do with that information. So instead, we spent some time with Rachael, with Jamie Robertson, who not everyone who we work with is called Robertson, but Jamie Robertson, who's one of the livestock building specialists. He used to be with SAC, and we spent a bit of time. So, in terms of what you can do to the building to reduce the pressure on the calves, one of the biggest things he said is he said, don't worry too much about active ventilation. He says you can do so much with passive ventilation and you don't need to worry about it breaking down. You don't need to worry about the cost of it. Just change a few things in your building. It can make a big difference. So the building, the picture in the top left, the air outlets, he thinks is the most important. You've got to get that stale air out the top of the roof. So we've been modifying a couple of our sheds to increase that. And then the air inlets that you need, it's very important that you get more air in the sides of the shed. And one of the big ways that he is a fan of that, a lot of people's sheds around here would be like the bottom right, with the small gaps. But what he's encouraged us to do is to go for what he calls Yorkshire, I think it's Yorkshire boarding. So instead of having one line with small gaps, have two lines with much bigger gaps. And basically what that does is the bigger gaps, the air does it looks like it's going to let in less air because you can't see through it, but as far as the air is concerned, there's just way more space. You get 2-3 times as much air in. And also when it's really windy and horrible and you don't want all that air coming in, it helps to actually slow down any storm winds. So that's kind of when we looked at the building based on, so actually from a technology point of view, the technology wasn't super useful. It was actually more speaking to people with experience that pushed us to make the changes that we made. So yeah, I think if you're going down the active ventilation, technology is probably useful. But for us, it was more to do with experience. I don't know what you want to chip in on building design, Rachel, or
Uh, well, probably not an awful lot because it was Jamie that came out and
yeah,
um
the smoke bomb.
steered us right. Yeah, smoke bombed and had his fag packet maths with him. He's a fascinating guy to watch work. But like we knew by walking through the shed when things were when we were struggling with stuff, like you and I both knew the shed is not helping us here. And it sort of was the easy, or not the easiest thing, but it's the biggest asset or the biggest hindrance you have is the shed. So yeah, I think it made sense to see what we could do to relieve as much pressure as we could from there. And the Yorkshire boarding thing, you've explained it perfectly that it's just bigger gaps. But with the double wood, it's not faster airflow, it's just more air, and it's not wetter air, it's just more air. And yeah, I think I'm saying right that we opened the ridge, didn't we?
Yeah,
Um,
we made it had a very narrow gap in the ridge and we opened that right out.
yeah,
So he gave us some calculations for how many meters squared of opening at the top you needed.
yeah,
And the way he said it was, it's like if the air can't get out the top, it goes up and then it comes back down again.
yeah,
So if they're coughing and stuff, all these pathogens, instead of going out the roof, they're just going round and back down.
yeah,
So it's just sort of amplifying any disease pressure you have in the shed. It's just sort of exaggerating it, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. But it was cool to work with him and edit what we have rather than think, oh, well, this shed's annoying, let's just bulldoze it and start again. Like by by being clever with what we've changed, I think it's helped quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it only cost us a couple £100 for our main calving shed. We bought some because we recycled. We didn't have to take all the boards off. We just had to get something inside and move them around and stuff. And it was like, a day's work and a couple £100, and we made a big difference to how that shed performs. I think it's amazing what you can do with just small, smart changes. So that was quite interesting. It didn't need to cost the world. But obviously, it's nice if you can get an actually shed, but yeah, that's not always possible or practical or to make financial sense. So that was definitely interesting working with Jamie. So the next thing we sort of looked at was nutrition and colostrum. So we've always done silage analysis. So when we're formulating our rations for the cows, because obviously when we're calving, that's the most critical time in terms of the build up to calving and during calving for our cows. We also did some metabolic testing with Rachael. I don't think this is something that you need to do regularly, but I think it's a really interesting thing to do to see where you're at and sort of learn from the results. This is all to do with sort of how well your cows are. I mean, Rachael, you probably explain it a lot better than me, the metabolic testing.
Yeah, well, if I explain it, we got to it because we were having problems with neonatal calf health. And we did the testing to prove that the issue was colostrum related. So we chased it back. You had your silage analysis. So like, okay, on paper, we know what the ration looks like. But in that situation where colostrum was going wrong, I think it's quite a good idea to ask the cow, like, how is this ration working for you, that she's got all she needs to make good colostrum. Like we focus quite a lot on the calf has to be healthy. So as the calf easily get on its feet, have vigor, and suit itself, but then she has to have the good stuff in her udder for it. So we kind of looked at it from both ends, that the cow has everything she needs to make good colostrum, and we calve the calf as healthily as we can, so it's got vigor and enthusiasm to get the colostrum. Because really, that colostrum bit was a huge turning point for how the system functioned. Once we focused in on that,
Yeah.
a lot of things like kind of spiraled and got better from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's so in terms of the testing, there's the metabolic testing on the cattle to see, yeah, like how they're responding to the diet, how much energy they're getting and stuff. And then there's you also have colostrum absorption tests. So these will give you a value for essentially how successful the antibody absorption has been from the colostrum. Now, again, I think these two things, they're really good tools to use, and they're really quite accurate nowadays. But I think both of them are like, it's not something you need to do routinely. It's something that's like, if you're having problems or if you're looking at your system and what you could improve, I think it's a really, really useful sort of process to go through and learn and make adjustments. And sort of, once you've got those learnings and I don't think it's something you need to do routinely. So they have these colostrum tests that they use for calves coming from dairy farms to to rearing units, because they want to know that they've not just sent them without anything in their belly. They want to know that they've actually had a bit of colostrum before they come there. But I think for a suckler farm, I just don't think it doesn't tell you anything that you can actually do anything about. It'll tell you it hasn't had colostrum or it has had colostrum. But at that point it's too late. So you can't, that's the whole problem with the colostrum, is once you miss that absorption time, is you're going to be dealing with a calf that's going to be compromised from then on. But I think there is maybe an argument for, there's some research about whether or not if you could select heifers, if they've had better colostrum, they're more likely to give better colostrum. But I like to, on this, I think, let the system tell you. The ones that have had the most colostrum are the ones that are going to perform the best. You pick your best heifers to breed from, so it sort of sorts itself out. You don't need to do, you don't need to use the technology here, but it is definitely a useful tool when you're having problems or you want to make changes. In terms of how we deal with the colostrum, we try as much as we can not to intervene. We know it's important that they get it quickly, but also from our experience, we find that when we start messing them around, getting them in pens and stuff, you're actually knocking the calf's confidence or knocking the cow's mothering ability, which is going to affect its intake over the next couple of days. So we do try and leave them up to maybe 6 hours, 7, but if they're after that point, we really do intervene to make sure that they get a good belly full, because we don't want to leave it any longer than that. But we do find that when they suit themselves, it does tend to work better. So it's not really too much on the technology side here, just more about some of the tests that are available that you can use. But a lot of it's just to do with, good farm management and sort of learning from your mistakes, I suppose. in terms of monitoring the calves, this is where most of the technology is sort of centered around. Um, so one of the things we've used for quite a long time is a calving camera. The calving cameras are just excellent. I think for not just, it's very helpful obviously for calving, but it helps with that not intervening. So we find that if you're intervening with calving, you're less likely that she's going to get colostrum and all that stuff. So it's allowing them to sort of function naturally at calving and just post calving as much as possible. Not being in the pen, not disturbing them. That's been really useful. And also, if you're sort of not sure if a calf's had a drink, it can be quite good. You can watch it on that. And then once they've calved, one of the big things we've implemented is these smart bell tags. So on the top right, so this little tag here, it goes into the calf when we tag it. So normally a few days old. There's a little bit on the face there that monitors the ear temperature of the calf. And then inside the tag, there's an accelerometer that monitors its movement, and it can tell how fast it's moving, how much it's moving, how much it's lying down, all this kind of stuff. So what it does is it sends alerts to your phone. It tells you, it has a list of calves that have alerts. There's red alerts and orange alerts. So the red alerts are calves that it says you should be worried about, and the orange ones are ones that are maybe something's not quite right. Now, this system is designed for dairy calves that are being bottle reared, essentially. That's what they developed it for. And we were I think we were the first beef farm in Scotland to use these. They're not fully commercially available at the moment. They're still they're quite far through the development process, but they're still not 100%. You can't just go out and buy them just quite yet. What we found is that with the young calves and stuff, very effective. It's giving us really good information. And if there's a calf, especially on the pneumonia, it's really good on. If there's a calf that you're thinking, I might inject, I might not, you can get up a little graph. It'll show you the temperature of the calf. It'll show you the activity of the calf over time, and it'll show it versus the rest of the group. And that can be really powerful because all of a sudden, if you see its temperature's taking a dive or it's gone up or its activity is taking a dive, it just helps you to make decisions about when to intervene. I think it's actually helped to make me a better stockman because I've been thinking more not just about what a calf looks now, but also thinking about how it's going to look in 6 hours, 12 hours. But what I will say is once the calves get a bit older, and once we've got cows bulling and stuff, their behavior changes a lot based on what the cows are doing. And the system struggles. So at the moment, right now, we've got calves that are, 2 to 4 months old, and we're getting a lot of false positive alerts and things, because calves going into the creep feed and lying all day, so there's definitely flaws with this system in terms of working on a beef suckling farm. But it works really well in the early stages. And then also, once the bulling's all done and everything calms down, it can be really good in springtime when we're busy lambing, because it's always, you get alerts up, something's not right. So it can be quite good at that. But at this moment in time, whilst the cows are bulling, it is actually struggling to tell what's a sick calf and what's just a calf that's avoiding the bull. But that's just the nature of, it started off as a dairy calf system, and they've tried it in the beef, and they are actually working with us and making changes to the algorithms to see if they can't get it working better. So I think it's a very useful tool. It's a work in progress, but yeah, it's very well made. Like all the equipment works very well. The tags are pretty robust. So yeah, definitely one to watch. And the final one is one that me and Rachel love. It's the scour test, because we get to go and get our little spoons out and go and find some scour. So this is something we've been using for the last couple of years. So basically what this is you get this little vial from this MSD. It's like a pack of 4, costs about 65, 70 pounds. And what you do is you see that spoon in the bottom right corner. You literally, if you've got a calf that's scouring, you get a little spoon and then you put it into this thing and you screw it shut and then it clicks and then it clicks again. And then the thing on the left has 4 different lateral flow tests. One is for rotavirus, one is for cryptosporidium, one is for what was it? Rotavirus, coronavirus, crypto, and E. coli. And it'll tell you what's positive, what's causing the scour or what is active in that calf scour. So this is really useful. The first calf that scours in a pen, we always get on this, and it'll tell us, because obviously if it's cryptosporidium, if it's rotavirus, if it's E. coli, they're 3 very different pathogens that behave in very different ways. So we have very different strategies for dealing with them. And the sooner you know what you're dealing with, the sooner we can make a plan about how we're going to deal with it, what we're going to use. So yeah, Rachel, I don't know if you want to talk a bit about these, because that's normally our first port of call when we're having a bit of an outbreak, isn't it?
Yeah. It's been like we as vets, we've had these floating about in our cars for as long as I've been practicing, but you're one of the first farms to just give a box to and say, knock yourself out. But it's been lovely information. I think the combination of all of that technology there, the ear tags, because they alert your phone, I think they pull your attention into the calves and you think about them from a different perspective now, rather than as long as everybody's got, ears up and face up, it's fine. It's like really focused in the way you look at the calves. So then detection of stuff is much easier, much earlier. So by the time you're seeing a sick calf, running that scour check is totally appropriate, because the calf is usually still pretty much sucking its mum, functional. And then by the time you use the check and get your diagnosis, the treatments are then, I feel that we're able to protect more critical antibiotics, because you can detect the right type of scour at the right time. So actually we can sometimes treat them a lot less. Like if we know it's a rota scour versus a corona scour, or once you prove the calf's got E. coli, then our antibiotic choice is justified. And it's usually happening before you've got a collapsed septic calf that needs me to come along and put it on a drip and stuff. It's all happening so much earlier. That calf side test is allowing you to make your diagnosis. Like, you send me a text to say I've had 3 calves with crypto, like I know instantly what's going on, and that's data we've collected to allow us to change up our plans and future plans to try and knock that flaw out of the system. So yeah, I think they've been really, really useful for how we treat things, and targeting antibiotics, reducing critical antibiotic use, and probably reducing vet time on farm, which I'm not sure I should advertise, but you know what I mean. It's worked well.
Yeah, and I think on the monitoring stuff, I just want to make it clear that the technology is sort of it's an assistance. Our primary monitoring is very, very close, stockmanship. We religiously walk through all of our calves twice a day, get up anything that's, looking, but, we make sure that we have eyes on calves twice a day. And that's a very important part of our monitoring. And if people spend a lot of time with calves, I think one of the most powerful things is, I was trying to explain to somebody that someone's calves just look sick. You look at them and their faces, the way they're holding their ears or whatever. So yeah, still, this is not a replacement for stockmanship. It's to help you out. I don't think there's anything available yet that can replace a good stockman. I think the technology is still a long way behind the human's ability to diagnose and monitor calves. But the good thing about the smart bell tag is it tells you things you can't see. So it tells you its temperature over time. It tells you its activity over time, things that you can't actually see by seeing them twice a day. So it's just extra information, and that's what it's all about. Extra information to take your stockmanship from here to a bit higher, you know. In terms of treatment, I think this is what Rachel's been touching on just there, is that timeliness is the absolute number one. Like, especially when you've got a lot of calves inside, as soon as you let a problem go from one calf to three calves to 10 calves, then all of a sudden it's just, you know, it's all about nipping problems in the bud, not just for spreading to other calves, but also, you know, you can do a little bit of reading on the further pneumonia progresses, how much it affects growth rates going forward, and all this kind of stuff. All these, the sicker the calf gets, the worse its performance is going to be, the more sick it's going to get the next time. And, you know, dealing with problems quickly and correctly is the most important thing. So going into calving season, we have a bit of a plan. Me and Rachel know sort of what we're going to be facing and how we're going to treat it, each thing. But we're always ready to change that plan. So when things are not going to plan, it's all about gathering evidence, using the information you have, and seeing what we missed, seeing what's turned up that wasn't there last time, or seeing, you know, why we're having problems, and come up with a new plan on how to treat it. Another thing on treatment, I think that what I've found over the last couple of years is that not treating borderline calves does not reduce your antibiotic use. So if you're worried about antibiotic use and you think, I'm going to wait until it's more sick, that's, I think, really counterintuitive. Like, we've been treating for pneumonia much earlier, and it means that it's very rare that we're doing repeat treatments on calves. As soon as it's starting to show signs, we're dealing with it and not seeing sort of repeat offenders the same. Because those ones that do get bad, you'll know everybody has one on their farm that just does rubbish its entire life. And you end up using a lot of antibiotics on it until you get it. So I think that's kind of our thoughts on it. But Rachel, treatment, I suppose, is your specialist subject.
Yeah, we've talked about it a lot, and like we talk about it a lot. Like when we sit down and do our annual health plan review, a lot of the time is to this stuff. Okay, yeah, we analyze where we've done well and where we've done wrong, but we always double check. If a calf's got this, I'm going to treat it with that. If it's got this, I'm going to treat it with that. And if that doesn't work, I'm going to use this. So you do have it all kind of planned out and mapped out. And you're pretty good at gathering the evidence. If anything's gone wrong and I've said, oh, I need that calf to go into the lab, so that I can say, so we can diagnose what's going on, so we can make the plan. Like, there's never a hesitancy. It's like, okay, yeah, there's a gap in our knowledge, we'll send the calf. So we're much more able to target treatments because we know things. And I totally agree that as a combination of your stockmanship and the ear tags and changing the system and everyone's focused on it, you're not doing 300 other things on the farm at the same time. We are definitely treating things when they are less sick, and using much less critical antibiotics, and hopefully we'll get the data that we're having more success that way, like you say, not more repeat treatments, and then we'll see it as it comes through the system that they're weaning out better and stuff like that. So the treatment is less me on the farm treating stuff, much more you sending me a text to say this is what's going on, and done when we're health planning to be like, here's the plan for all the different things that we're gonna, or we kind of know we come up against. So it's all sort of pre-planned.
Yeah. No. So the final thing was on prevention. So I think one of the things we're going to talk about, we're having our health plan meeting soon, so we're going to actually probably vaccinate for more stuff next year. We haven't been vaccinating for Rota and Corona in our autumn calf, whereas but I think it's something that we're definitely going to consider. There's also a new cryptosporidium vaccine that's out, so I think we might give that a try. So we haven't actually lost calves to these things per se this year, but one of the things that's sort of, well, there was a meeting where they're trying to flog this vaccine, but one of the things they were talking about was how getting sick with one thing can make them much more likely to develop pneumonia. So actually, even though, we had a smattering of rotavirus and we had a bit of crypto this year, but didn't lose anything. But it's probably having a knock-on effect with pneumonia, just because they're compromised at a critical time in their life. So vaccinating for things that are not killing them but are affecting them is something that we're definitely looking into this year. But in terms of prevention, we believe that genetics is the driving force. So cows that calve themselves and the calf gets up and sooks, in terms of reducing sick calves, that's absolutely paramount. I think it's the most important thing. It's just eliminating problems instead of treating them. Generally, if we're dealing with sick calves that got sick with this or that, it's a cow that's ended up with a big udder, or it's an old cow, or it's been a set of twins, or generally there's an explanation. So minimizing the amount of cows on your farm that are going to give you those problems is absolutely paramount. And looking at your EID data management is an important part of that. So just looking at how you're recording problems, and they're all EID tagged now. So, and there's lots of farm management platforms, but it's just about what works for you, how you can make the best decisions on selection. Another thing I've said is to be honest with the flaws in your system. So just sort of actually, knowing what you're not good at and knowing what you don't know and trying to work out how you improve that. So, but yeah, maybe on the vaccines, Rachel, I don't know if you have any thoughts on them.
Well, I want to reference back to something you said when we were chatting before we went live, and you flipped through your slideshow. The first thing you said was, well, vaccines are technology. And I thought that's a really, really good way of thinking about this. Vaccines absolutely are technology. And vaccinating in the right place for the right thing at the right time when it's relevant to you can be hugely, hugely helpful. There's a lot of vaccines on the market, so it's a little bit tempting to get trigger happy. And I remember we spoke about this right at the beginning, when neonatal calf health was a bit sticky. There's vaccines for this, and there's vaccines for that, and there's vaccines for the other.
Yeah.
But we kind of all agreed, actually, if the calf's not healthy, the cow's not calm, it can't suck colostrum, that vaccine is a waste. So there's so much that we've tightened up in terms of calving, colostrum, cow temperament, udder, calving ease, so that when we now do introduce a new calf scour vaccine, we're doing it with accuracy, and the system is in place to make it work. So I think vaccines don't replace good husbandry and good stockmanship, but they are definitely useful when you are very, very specific with them.
I think also we've learned a lot more, Rachel, about the pathogens that we have on our farm and the things that affect us. So I think we can be smarter with the vaccines, because I think with the scour tests and stuff, we know a lot more in terms of what's affecting us. But I think this year's is the example of we've got on top of the treatment and the diagnosis. So we haven't lost many calves this year. We've actually had a really good calving in terms of not having losses of young calves. But it's been a lot of work. It's been, we've spent a lot of time watching them. We've spent a lot of time having to treat this and that. And I think now the next stage going into next year is what can we do to reduce the pressure on the system? And I think that vaccines of pathogens we know we have on the farm, I think is a really sort of pragmatic, smart move. So I think that's definitely sort of how, like you said, when we first started talking about vaccines, you're like, we can't just vaccinate for everything.
Yeah, I remember that.
But at the same time, I think Rota and Corona for all of our cows costs less than losing one or something. I think I did that, work that out. So I do think that the right vaccine at the right time is really hopefully going to reduce pressure next year, and hopefully we'll also have not very many losses, but I won't have to spend so much time looking after them. But yeah, I mean, in terms of sick calves, do rubbish, they make you feel rubbish. I think that's one of the big things is that, we love our cattle, we love working with them, and I've yet to meet someone that loves tubing a calf that's dying or, dealing with scour. So I think it's just the less sick calves you have on the farm, the better the whole system works and the better you feel about it. So I think it's all about nailing the first few months. So I actually just said to Rachel and Kirsten before we came on, with our autumn calving and with our focus on calf health last summer, we did not inject one calf from turnout until weaning. So that was really one of the core things with our autumn calving plan, was that we get calves going out at, coming on for 200 kilos and nice fit calves, and then we can almost not forget about them, but we don't need to worry too much about them in the summer when we're busy doing other stuff. So, so that's been really, really good to see, and I'm hoping we're going to have a similar summer this year. But I'm sure there's always something that's going to come along and scupper it. But and in terms of technology, I think it's very important that you pick technology that addresses your problems you're having on your farm, and technology that's going to provide you with answers or something that you can actually act upon. Just collecting data that you don't like. For me, the temperature humidity, I didn't use it, so there's no point in investing in any more of that from my point of view. The smart bell tags I think are very useful, but need to just see how they get on with developing them. But I'm quite confident that they're working hard on it. So we'll see where that goes in the next few months. Things like the scour check and stuff, that just become part of what we do on the farm. So yeah, picking technology that addresses your problems, but not expecting it to do anything on its own. You got to work with it. You got to know what your plan is. I don't know if you've got any closing remarks, Rachel.
No, I think you've summed it up pretty well. Sick calves kill your profitability, but it absolutely killed your guys' enthusiasm when things were hard and everyone was just like, ugh.
Yeah.
So I know that you've done, like, hats off to you that you've done the work in changing up everything. We've been really thorough. We've worked from the bottom up through stockmanship, the building, colostrum, cows. Like, hopefully now we're at the end of it and we add the vaccine. Until the next problem sideswipes us, like we should hopefully have made a big difference to your quality of life on the farm as well as your profitability.
Brilliant. Thank you, folks. I think it is really lovely actually to see such a proactive vet and farmer approach, and hearing you even talking together. It's really good to hear about the journey and everything else. I wonder if we go back to the buildings, Dan, go back to the
Let me
start.
go back to that slide.
And one thing, I was the only non-Robertson at that meeting of Jamie, Rachel, Dan and Andrew. And I think quite an important bit there is the building in question there is a tenanted building, isn't it? So you could have thrown loads of expense at it, but actually at the end of the day, it was on a short tenancy, wasn't it? So the improvements you made on it, you said what the costs were there, but those least cost options that you chose actually have made a really big effect to you. And I just wonder if you've got any kind of quantify on the likes of, are you using more bedding, less bedding for opening it up? How much impact have you seen? Like, how much less time are you spending on treating calves and that type of thing?
I think these things are it's really difficult actually. Um, I think it's difficult to know. We're betting a lot at the moment just because they're bullying like mad and we haven't been able to muck out and it's a bit of a difficult year in that regard. Um, but no, I think the biggest difference you notice is I think when you're in the shed, it just feels cleaner, feels like it's less stale. Um, but in terms of actually being able to quantify it, I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can. So I think it's just trusting your experts and just trusting that even if it only makes a small difference can make a big difference. Um, I think that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah, and there's somebody has put in more of a statement rather than a question, and it's about Jamie's volume measurements, about how important they are. And from memory, you can keep me right maybe here, but the outlet ridge, was it 0.1 square meter per animal that's in the building?
I'd have to
Oh,
look back his email. I can't remember, but yeah, he just gave us a number that was yeah, I'd have to look that up. Well, I have got it on the tip of my fingers, I'm afraid.
It's something that it's the standardized figures there that are actually really, really important, and that is such a simple thing to do. Cut to a bit of roof, change the boarding, and like you've explained, it has had such great results for you. Rachel, moving on to colostrum. Someone
mhm.
has asked what the rough cost of colostrum absorption and metabolic testing is.
Um, so to get the metabolic profile done, you've obviously got your vet visit and blood sample, so that's specific to the farm. And then Dan, I think we sent ours to SRUC, didn't we? And I think that's roughly 24-ish pounds a cow if you run the ruminant profile. You can add bits and pieces if you're worried about magnesium or calcium or whatever else. And you can also do it through is it the dairy herd health thing at the Dick Vet School. I can't remember the cost of that off the top of my head. And the calf colostrum absorption thing, we when we did it, it was all by blood, and the blood was sent to SAC for a ZST test. That's probably a relatively expensive way of doing it. Lots of vets would do a calf side total protein, and I know that there's now a calf side lateral flow for colostrum absorption testing, but I think they're also relatively expensive. We might have been, was it 15, 16 pounds per ZST test to SRUC, something like that. I feel like, don't quote me on that. But hopefully for in that situation, the value came from, well, I was there to see the calf, to take the blood test. So I kind of knew what it was sick from. And then we got really, what's the word, quantitative data back, black and white. Here's what its colostrum absorption was. So it proved quite a big point, and we spent a lot of time and your effort and energy on fixing that loophole first.
Okay. If we fast forward onto the smart bell, Dan, um, I think it's maybe quite important to point out that these aren't an official tag; they're an addition to your official
Yeah,
tag,
so we have two flag tags and then this is a third tag.
but they are reusable.
Yeah, so it's got a little battery inside it. And what we do with the beef calves is we tag them when they're a couple of days old, and then we do Bravoxin before we put them out to pasture. And then when we're doing the second Bravoxin, we just cut the tag out. And then it's just a case we keep the tags over summer, and then when it's winter time, just put a new battery in, and then another. It just goes on with a normal button back. So you can just buy your button backs from Shearwell and then just put in another one. The battery technically does last for a couple of years, but they said if you're taking it out, just change it because the batteries are not that expensive.
And you spoke about loads of benefits, especially with your young calf health. I'm not sure if I picked up on you speaking about like you're addressing issues head on, if not before you would normally see it. But you've also got the benefit as well, haven't you, that you're not getting the same secondary infections that you may normally get if a calf has suffered from illness early in life.
Yeah, I think we're finding more like if you wait until they're quite bad with pneumonia, what you'll find is you treat them and then you treat them again, and then they kind of get fine, and then a couple of weeks later they get pneumonia again, and then a couple of weeks later they get it again. So it's been sometimes treating calves. I think there was one time my brother was up and he was helping me catch a calf, and he was like, "Is this one you're treating?" And I was like, "Yeah, this is." And he was like, "All right, okay." Didn't think there was that much wrong with it, but um, I think once you spend more time with the tags and a lot of time with the calves, you get to see those markers on their smart bell traces that are indicative of a downhill trajectory incoming. So you do sort of learn a little bit more sort of when to intervene intuitively by working with the data from the smart belt.
So with the smart bell, you're possibly having lower drug use, are you?
It's difficult to know, I guess. Every year is different, but I think certainly, like Rachel said, we're not getting that. We haven't had very many like really sick calves. We had two calves this year that got absolutely nuked by the very early onset E. coli, but beyond that, everything's not actually been that sick. So then, because obviously when they're really sick and the vets are trying everything, they're throwing all the fancy antibiotics at it, and that's what we really want to try and avoid in terms of cost and in terms of, and you spend a lot of money on a calf like that, and invariably it dies a couple of months later anyway. So yeah, it's more just about, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm using a whole lot less. Probably I'm using less, but it's just more effective. It's the biggest thing I would think would be would be my thoughts on it.
The There is a question about cost, but I'm trying to push the benefits before I ask the cost. The other side of it is you won't have the penalty and live weight gain that you would possibly have if you're treating a calf nice and early. Then it's not having that lasting effect that you're losing potential live weight gain per day as well.
Yeah, I think obviously it's important you don't go so far that you're using antibiotics as like a growth promoter, um, but yeah, I think it's that avoiding lung damage is the most important thing with pneumonia, because once you start getting into that lung damage realm, then all of a sudden the live weights just the daily live weight gain drops off a cliff once you start getting up to the percentage of lung damaged. Um, so yeah, that's what we're really trying to avoid is lung damage.
Yeah. And can we address the cost question? How much do they cost?
Yeah, so it was more or less £10,000 for 3 years on 140 cattle. Um, the the ongoing cost would be slightly lower than that because there was obviously the cost of setting up the base stations and stuff. But as a rough rule of thumb, I guess £10,000 for 3 years of data. And if I'm honest, I don't know if I would have invested in that had it not been, obviously the whole point of the project was that there was support so that we could help to make these investments. So unsupported, I'm not sure if I would have had the confidence to make that. Also, until if they can address the issues around beef calves behaving differently, which I'm sure they can. They're just working on it. I think it is a worthwhile investment, but at the moment, with there being problems, obviously it's a less attractive investment. But it's they've capped the number of farms they're working with at 20, so they don't overstretch. They're not trying to sell to everybody, and well, so they're working really hard to continue developing this product, and I'm convinced that the guys I've spoken to, the guys I've worked with, they've been very, very switched on, very keen to hear feedback, good and bad, and quick to implement changes. So I do think that they're onto something good.
I think it's sorry, Rachel.
Sorry, I was just going to ask Dan, do you think, this is my curiosity with the tags, that do you think there's an element of once you've got your eye into them over a certain period where you've got the data and the stockmanship, do you think there could come a time where you need them less because they've trained you?
Part of me's thinking that now. Yeah, I think I'm starting to think that once I've done the 3 years, I think I'll have learned a lot about what affects my calves, and I think, and also they do help you to be a better stockman because they give you information you don't have, and you start to be able to see that in the calves. So you see the signs of calves that are. So yeah, I think there's definitely an element of that. Is that it's maybe a more subtle version of like, we did the learnings from the metabolic. It's not quite as clean cut as that. Make your learnings move on. But I do think that I'm questioning myself whether or not beyond the 3 years, maybe I'll have learned enough that I can go back to sort of lower cost and simpler system with the learnings. So yeah, it's a very good point.
And within that, you're going to have a more robust vaccination program as well, which should be reducing anything too.
Yeah, exactly.
Talk us through a red alert then. So you get an alert, you go and have a look at the calf. Calf looks okay, its temperature is okay. What do you do?
So when the system's functioning well, so for example, like in the early stages, I got 2 red alerts one morning, and both of those calves I decided needed antibiotics because they had pneumonia. So when it's working well, you want to get eyes on the red alerts, and you want to be quite sure that there's nothing wrong with it before you don't intervene. If that makes sense. It's kind of like tipping it the other way. Instead of assuming all the calves are fine and trying to find problems, it's like it tells you calves that are problems, and then as a stockman, you're trying to determine if they're fine. So it kind of flips it around a little bit, which can be quite useful in terms of, because it's sometimes easy to be walking through a pen of calves, there's calves. It can be quite easy to miss a calf, or there's one lying, you don't get it up or whatever. But if you've got 2 tag numbers that have been flagged, you definitely make sure you get eyes on them and you sort of look at them a bit more closely. That's where it's really powerful. The problem comes this morning. I had 42 alerts. That's the problem with the system when there's bullying. So I can't go and look at 42 calves. It's not possible. Not helpful. So that's the issue, really. But when the system's working well, basically the way it works is if I've got a red alert, I'm looking at that calf closely. I'm thinking, and also if there's a calf that's maybe an orange alert or not alert that I'm starting to think, it's not looking great, I'll look at his graphs and I'll see if there's anything in the graphs that are showing a trend that's making me more worried, that's making me more likely to inject it.
Rachel, would you add anything to that?
No, not necessarily. I think when you first showed me the data, that first year you had it, and we sat down to do the health plan, and you're like, "Hey, look at this on my phone." I was like, "Whoa, what is all that?" And obviously we're looking at it around the kitchen table, so it was pretty hard to interpret what any of that means. But I think if you correlate the two things, like Kirsten's saying, a red alert with normal temperature, and you go and see it, and you're like, "It's not that bad." The chances are you're not going to inject that based purely on the red alert, but something's flagged that calf, so it'll stick with you. But if you got a red alert for movement and a red alert for temperature, and you go and see it and it's puffing, it's like that you don't need. What else do you need before you're gonna treat it? But I think I thought when you first got it, I was like, this looks like it could get overwhelming. And I remember we spoke at the kitchen table to be like, where do you draw the line of like, where do you say above this line gets treated, below this line gets ignored? And it was sort of like well, we're just gonna have to figure that out as we go, kind of, till you get a feel for it, I guess. And like you very, very acutely understand now when the cows are bulling that the data that the tag gives you is kind of gut because the calves are not acting like they would normally. So, now we're not pulling 42 alerts and going and jabbing 42 calves. You can already eliminate that pressure.
Yeah, I think
Very much.
you
Sorry,
just
it
have
very
to
much
go back to
highlights.
stockmanship when it's behaving like that. It's kind of the way we see it. When it's working well, like at the start of the season and at the end of the season, but in the middle where it struggles, we just go back to relying on stockmanship for a while, and then yeah.
It's a tool, isn't it, to use alongside stocksmanship? Absolutely. Rachel, there's a really good question that I'm going to hit you with, and that
Uh-oh.
is, what top 2 things have you learned from doing this work with Dan that you use to advise other farmers?
Enthusiasm is key. Like none of this is possible without somebody who cares and is willing to do the work. Um, and that's something to harness. And everyone has that. Every farm has enthusiasm for something. It's about tapping into it and finding it. And like because we started at the bottom, I would say that's the other thing. Start at the bottom. That it's tempting as a vet when you've got all this stuff available to you that you can swoop in and do a vet thing and think, well, that'll fix it. Happy days. But the bottom stuff is the foundations that any fancy vet stuff, vaccines, whatever else, it doesn't work if the foundations at the bottom aren't there. So like we were quite lucky that we did the bottom steps and all of the folk on the farm were enthusiastic about it, if that makes any sense.
No, that's good. Dan, a final question for you then. What's next? What tech are you looking at, or what's happening next?
So I talked a little bit about this at our we did that bit for FAS TV. I think actually in terms of technology, I'm not really looking at implementing too much more technology. It's more just about um, taking the learnings, tightening up a few things, always looking for what's next and always keeping our eyes open if something does come along. But right now my focus is on sort of tightening the screws on the system, making sure that the things that we've talked about we're implementing and that we're, implementing them in a way that they're being implemented religiously or effectively. It's all very well, coming up with a great ration for your cows, but if it's not actually getting put out the same way every day, or same with, you know, even little things, just like we're making a few changes to where we have the creep feeds, and we're making a few changes to the pen design just to try and reduce the amount of cow flow in the bedding areas and maximizing the amount of time that the calves have. So just very little changes. But in terms of technology, I think actually um, good for a bit, I think, hopefully. But I'll see. There's always going to be something new, isn't there?
That's quite an important thing you've said there, actually, is that you have quite a lot of tech. And just tonight we have just shown a small amount. We've not mentioned the beef monitor. We've not mentioned any of your sheep kit. So there's a whole host of kit that you've got at Titaboutie. And there is a point that there's too much data. So you have to really know what information you want to get, what makes a difference to your business, and not overwhelm yourself as well, because it can become quite overwhelming if you've got data overload. You need to know where you want to get to, or where the weak spots are within the business that tech could help.
Well, I think one of the things, so, I've got loads of blind spots when it comes to farming because I didn't study agriculture. I did study engineering, and one of the things that helps me is that when it comes to um, process control and that kind of stuff, I've got a lot more experience. So one of the things they do in engineering is DMAIC, so DMAIC. So when you've got a problem, you first define, then you measure, you analyze, you implement a change, and then you control it. So first of all, we define where the problem, then you measure. So that's where the technology comes in. It's all about gathering data, finding out how big the problem is, finding out exactly what's going on. But we've analyzed the data, we've done a lot of work with that, but it's the implementing and controlling. Now, the really important things, and technology does not help you at all with that. It's all up to you to implement changes on your farm and to make controls so that those changes, you know, make controls so that the things you implement actually get executed. So I think that's the area that I'm focusing on just now in terms of I can't keep capturing data and learning and never actually stopping and implementing what we've learned. So I think right now that's where I'm at, implementation and control.
Finally, absolute last question, I promise, but one piece of advice to our listeners tonight that are thinking about implementing some of the tech you've spoken about or tech somehow in their system, what would it be?
Don't listen to anyone, just focus on yourself. Don't don't look at my technology and think, oh, I'll just do what they're doing or whatever. Think, just be really honest about what you need, what's the problem you've got, what are the problems that you're facing, because everybody's facing different problems. There's so many small factors that can mean you've got problems with this or problems with that. So I think, yeah, really focusing on yourself and your own problems, and then finding technology that fits that rather than just seeing they're doing that, I'm going to do that. Or because I think you can spend money on technology and really not get much from it. If it's a bit of an impulse purchase or it's something you don't fully understand how you're going to make those changes.
So research it, know what you want, and don't listen to anybody.
So. Yeah, no, it's important. It's important that you understand what change you're going to make. If you've got technology, you've got to make a system change. Because if you don't make a system change off the back of technology, then nothing's going to change. Because if you don't change your system, the results are going to be the same. So it's all about understanding what problem you have, and then working out how you might change your system to deal with it. So the technology helps you with that, but it doesn't do it for you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, both. If anybody wants to understand Dan and Andrew's system better, there is actually a Fast TV episode that shows the system and how we use tech. So maybe send that round the email addresses so you can see that. And please do have a look at the One Agritech website pages as well, because there's a whole host of information in there. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you to both Dan and Rachel. Good night.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. I hope you got something from it. I hope it was useful. So.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be part of it.
Good.